Okay, now it is the favorite time, my favorite time. It is to share the sermon. That's not true. I like so, today we have a message name. Yes, the message for today, it's called in loyalty and integrity in everything that we do. And I'm gonna pull it up in just a second on my iPad. I have it in my iPad, I promise. I looked at it just yesterday night. Oh, I know what I'm not doing. Oh, good job. Okay, so integrity and loyal in everything that we do. We had a rather interesting message today on Genesis chapter 33, verses 1 to 18. And it's interesting because one, we don't get to preach a lot about Genesis, so I kind of appreciate the way in which the lectionary has us doing something different. Usually I tend to preach over about Matthew. I kind of like Matthew a lot. But anyway, in today's world, we have cynicism and distrust, right? It is everywhere. We find those things in some of the concerns that you have brought. Some of those things were talked about. And the story today, or perhaps it is crucial to remember stories perhaps of forgiveness and siblinghood. The story of Jacob and Esau, I'm going to say it in Spanish, Esau, I'm not sure how you pronounce that in English, is one of the most important and perhaps inspiring tales in the Bible that teaches us this valuable lesson. Jacob and Esau's story teaches us about the critical role of loyalty, forgiveness, and honesty, and building and maintaining perhaps strong relationships. I want to start out by, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the message for today, last week I was not here. I was in Washington. There was a new building for a church, for a Hispanic Latinx church being open in Washington State. It was a beautiful building that it actually cost about $2 million or so. The initial property of that congregation looked identical to our property here. And they didn't choose to sell their property. The property was sold. The property cost multiple millions of dollars. And so this congregation for years worshiped on Zoom, worshiped in different ways. And so the conference finally were able to provide this church a nice building, a smaller building than what they originally had. And it was a celebration of the facilities where Bishop Cedric Bridgeford was part of. And we also had a training to ask ourselves how to create reconciling congregations in the Hispanic Latinx community. But that was not one of the only things that happened there. For over a year, there was this pastor who transitioned. And his pastor's dad was also a pastor, specifically in that church in which we were celebrating. I'm gonna take my shoes off. Yeah, I know, right? That's what a former pastor says, you're standing on holy ground or sacred ground, right? And so either way, there was a very painful situation that these two pastors had. And I'm not gonna go into the nitty-gritty of it because I think that will be like a whole thing that I would need to talk about. And yeah, we prayed and we talked, but the Spirit has a way of doing things. And this was the first time that my friend pastor was seeing their parents. And the Spirit worked in such a way that there could be reconciliation. Now, I'm not going to say that their job when reconciliation is done, right? But God grants us opportunities. And I feel that what we're going to be talking about today is one of those opportunities also that God grants us. So I'll explain why. Jacob and Esau's story teaches us about the critical role of loyalty and forgiveness and honesty and maintaining strong relationships. We all know human relationships are rather complicated. The story began with the birth of Jacob and Esau, who were twin brothers. Esau was the firstborn and had a strong claim as the leader of the family. However, Jacob was cunning and manipulative and tricked his brother into giving up his birthright. How many of us recall that story in the Bible? Right, a couple of us, yes. He disguised himself as Esau to steal the blessing from his father. Jacob's deceitful act set in motion a bitter feud between them. For those that have a sibling, you know how that goes sometimes when you're fighting, right? I have siblings. Leading Esau to plan perhaps his revenge against Jacob. From this, we can understand that dishonesty and treachery can lead to conflict and animosity that can perhaps last for years. One of the funny things that my daddy always used to say to anyone that would come around arguments that I have with my sister. My sister and I love each other very much, but we do have our times where we don't like each other very much. And so sometimes people would be worried, oh no, don't fight with your sister. And my dad very wisely said, don't get involved. They love and hate each other all the time. I love my sister for the most part, right? And it's like petty stuff that we fight about, nothing important. But in this case, it was rather different, right? Jacob did this unthinkable thing, which is to take the blessing away from Esau, right? He even dressed, and we all know that story. Jacob knew that what he had done did not sit well with himself. He knew that he did this wrong thing to his brother, and he perhaps was fearful of Esau's retaliation. Consequently, he fled to his uncle's Laban's house, kind of like trying to hide after what he had done, where he was hopefully able to find a wife and secure his place in the world. Laban, I'm going to say his name, Laban or Levan, I don't even know how to pronounce it in English. Being just as deceitful as Jacob, also tricked him into marrying the wrong sister. He ended up having to work 14 years. Can you think about that? Working 14 years to be able to marry someone. And being able to marry before Rachel, who is actually the woman he truly loved. At this point in the story, we learn that dishonesty has consequences and that we perhaps must pay for wrongdoings. In other words, some people say karma, right? We don't really believe in karma, but you all know what karma means, right? However, we must also learn about the power also of the perseverance of love and the endurance of love. I know a couple of us might be angry or mad at our siblings. It might be very difficult to find healing. Maybe we have been the ones that had done the wrongdoing. But years later, when Jacob had become wealthy and prosperous, he received the word that Esau was coming to meet him. Looking for forgiveness, Jacob devised a plan to present gifts to his brother. Kind of like saying, you know, I did you wrong. Let me just show you out all of these beautiful things so that you could be less angry at me because I know I did you dirty. And also in hopes to look for forgiveness, Jacob devised this plan to present his gifts, perhaps to appease him, to surprise Esau. To his surprise, Esau forgave him and welcomed him already with open arms. How different, right? I would be mad. There's one thing that you need to know about me is that sometimes I tend to be a little bit petty. And sometimes it's hard to let go. But Esau let it go. He welcomed his brother with open arms. And this story of forgiveness teaches us that it's never perhaps too late to be reconciled with those we've mistreated. It also shows us the importance of humility and the power of forgiveness. Now, I know it's difficult. It is very difficult to forgive someone that has done something wrong to you, right? Or it's very difficult and even times more difficult to acknowledge that we have mistreated others. So the story of Jacob and Esau is a perfect example of how God works in people's lives when they try to seek guidance. Siblings, let me tell you today that, and I'm not gonna say that I have this down, okay? I don't have this down. I wish I did. But we cannot be worshiping God and we're still mad at our neighbor. We cannot be worshiping God if we're still mad at our own family. We cannot be worshiping God or saying that we love others. And I'm not saying that, you know, if someone did something traumatic to you and that took you a lot of mental health to recover from, I'm not saying that you forget that. I'm not saying that, right? I'm not saying go back to situations that create violence for you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's the healing part, the forgiving part. Or asking for that forgiveness. Being real with what happened. When Jacob was fleeing from Esau, he had a dream in which God promised him protection and blessings. This dream convinced Jacob that God would always be with him and guide him throughout his life. The importance of trusting in God and his plans for our lives is another takeaway from this also story. In conclusion, the story of Jacob and Esau teaches us many valuable lessons, including the importance of being loyal to our family members or to the people that we love. And I'm not saying just family members, the ones that you share blood with, but those that actually become your family as well. Perseverance, to go after those things. Of forgiveness, to heal, to let go, to move on, to acknowledge. And the most importantly, I think humility, to be real with who we are. Now, here's the most important one. And trusting God. Trusting God that everything will be made well. These perhaps are essential values that could help us build a strong and lasting relationships with others and those around us. Perhaps from our siblings to our friends, to our community members. How would our world look like if we did such a thing? I want to ask you a couple of questions today for reflection, or for you to ponder upon. How can we live in the midst of our differences? And the second one is, what are the challenges that this story leaves us? Where is God speaking to you, speaking to us today? We have an important task set out for us. This is the message for today. Amen. So, I'm going to continue.